There. Good evening, everybody. Here we are again at the cable easel. I have returned from my travels and ready to present another program devoted to painting and drawing. The spring, of course, is upon us, thank goodness, and I've brought in a flower study, which I have been doing for the last few days. But before we talk about that, just let me show you where I've been. I went to the southern part of France and I managed to do 4 paintings during the week that I was there. And here they are. This little one is a study of a place called the Chateau d'If, which is where, presumably, Edmond Dantes was imprisoned. It isn't so, it's just a myth, but maybe we can get a close-up on that in a little while and be easier to talk about it. There, this is the Mediterranean blue. Absolutely unbelievable how blue the Mediterranean Sea becomes. And these little pink rooftops are part of the city of Marseille, which is right there down at the southern part of France. Here is a rather larger study of that same fortress, which was a prison for too many years, in which many cruelties took place, but it's quite remarkable. On a pile of rock here is this really huge fortification, and I went and did a number of trips there. Here is another one. This is a view of some of the rooftops of Marseille with a little bit of the brilliant blue Mediterranean Sea way off in the distance, and I rather love these little chimney places which are so characteristic of the countryside in Europe. And here is a final one. This is a view of the entire port of Marseille, which is the largest oil importing port in Europe, except for Rotterdam. But this little old port is exactly the way it probably was 500, 600, maybe even 1,000 years ago. With the fortress at the entrance to the harbor, and all the fishing people come in at 6 o'clock in the morning and sell their fish right there on the dock. And so I've got the crowd depicted, and this wonderful, very placid, blue, calm harbor, which is just absolutely a beehive of activity for most of the day. So there's the visual remnants of my trip abroad. My other remnant is in my soul, which means really I'm glad to be back. The best way to find out what America is all about is to leave it for a short while, and then you realize how gifted we are here and how really we are endowed with many, many blessings, which sometimes we may not appreciate until we leave them. But here is a study. Over there is a rather large study, some oversized tulips from my garden, and I'm going to be working on some tulips this evening. Let me remove this so that I can show you. There are some really oversized studies of these tulips. The pink one is the one that I did this afternoon, just before I came up here in the afternoon sunshine. As you can see, I'm working very large. Well, I'll show you in comparison to my hand. Here's how big that flower is. So you all know the size of a hand, and so you can see that the flower is really very large, not as large as I've done them, but it's a wonderful way of showing the great detail in these remarkable blooms. And then the red one I did yesterday at about the same time. I'm not sure that I'm too happy with the red. I'll probably rework it. And then there is one over there at the end which is not, I mean, it doesn't look like a tulip, but it is, and it's got a particular name, and I'm not quite sure what the name is, but it's a beautiful pinkish, flesh-colored business, and it's really a very enchanting flower. Well, I'm going to be working from real flowers. That's my thing, working from life, and hope that you can absorb what I'm going to attempt to explain and to demonstrate. If you have any questions, call me. They'll give you the number on the screen. I'm here to answer, if I can, your questions and to talk to you about your interests or problems about painting and drawing. So, I'm going to start to lay this out. I started just before airtime to start to lay this out a little bit on a rather smallish canvas. This small canvas, there's the size of it. It is not that big, but I'm going to do the flowers slightly oversized because I've shown you what an oversized flower painting looks like. And it's perfectly fine to play with proportions, providing you're consistent. You don't do one very large flower and then introduce a very small one. So be consistent with the proportion. And here's the way we're going to start this, the way I'm going to start laying this out. I'm working in some white, diluted white paint, and I'm drawing them. Obviously, I assume that anybody who is going to start a project like this has some knowledge of drawing. If you don't, then it is not time to start painting. If you don't have knowledge of drawing, it is time for you to start to learn how to draw. Because unlike many programs that are giving demonstrations of painting and drawing, the assumption is that you don't have to draw at all, and you don't have to compose. You just go right on in there and you start slapping the paint on. Well, that may be okay for some aspects of learning how to paint, but it is not mine. So I always try to bring in something from life. Sometimes when I do a landscape, I do it from a sketch that I have done out there in the field, in the wild, and sometimes I simply bring in the setup here. As you can see, I go one petal at a time, in no particular order of where the petals are, except that I like to know that this one is behind that one and so forth. And so, as you can see, it is merely the placement of these blooms and a rather comprehensive drawing. So, I spoke with a lady on the telephone this morning. She called me about the use of the Maragé medium, which I spoke about at the Brookhaven Art League last month. And if she has any more questions, she ought to feel free to call me. Now, here we have a rather large, the large red one, which seems to dominate this composition. Let me put my glasses on because I think the red is very perplexing because it is it's so brilliant that many times a lot of the shadows disappear into nothing. But I have given the oval of the open cup, which is what the tulip is. A tulip is an open cup with variations. And the one layout that I did do on it is to give you the shape of the opening. It is essential that you know where that opening is, and also that you have some idea of the size of it. The rest of it falls into place, providing you keep within the plan of the opening. So let's see, and now we have the rest of the cup. Obviously, this is the way the tulip is going to be built, and then when you've got that form laid out, then you place the petals, divide them as they need to be divided, and you place them in their proper place. What you need to do is to find the vein, such as this. The vein in each petal will give you the idea of the direction of that petal and the manner in which it is coming out of the center part. So I'm pretty much sticking to the shape of the opening. Here is the vein for the next petal, and they come together in a nice little divided pattern here. And as you can see, we've got 1, 2, 3 petals. Not that you have to count them, because if you're paying attention, the petals are going to fall into place by themselves, using proportion as to where one goes in relationship to the other. Now we have the vein of this final one. Here's the vein of this one. This vein comes down there, and as you can see, it makes a great deal of sense. It's quite logical. And the design will, when you finally wind up painting it, you will find that with a proper amount of drawing, you're not going to have too many problems convincing people that this is in fact an open tulip. Because this is the point where everything converges. And it all faces that way, as you can see. Logic is maybe a boring subject in school, but when you're dealing with something as complex as a flower, you have to be logical. And checking once again with the petals, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're almost home free. Naturally, the stem is going to come right from the center of the growing place. And I've got a little pink one hiding back here. Well, he's very nice and he's got a very interesting pattern. Pink with red edges, white edges on it. There's that outer thing, and I'm losing a great deal because it's behind it, so I'm just going to be drawing what I see. Keep bearing in mind that what I see is the reason that I work in this life class. So we have here a very simplified drawing. And I'm going to pull this green leaf up just a little bit, composition being what it is. I want to include a slight amount of leaf, and even though it's much further down, I've simply shortened this stem somewhat because I want to show some green down here, and the stems are too long for this shape of canvas. So here is a preliminary a beginning of how to do this kind of a flower painting. All right. Well, let's see who's calling me. Good evening, and who are you?
My name's Lois. I would like to know, how do you make the flowers look so real?
I look at them, and I transfer what I see. It's all a question of color, and also paying attention very literally to what I see. I can analyze that a little bit later unless they want to take a shot of that flower right now, and I will talk about the literal observation of one of these flowers. Let me just kind of show you what I'm talking about, if we can get a shot of this pink one. When I was doing it this afternoon, let me push this over here and get a shot of this flower. Oh, great. You see, this shadow was very clear, and I had to pay very great attention to that shadow in order to make it look as if it was third dimensional. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this shadow was very clear. I worked in the sun. This shadow is important to make this petal come towards you. The same as the color of the bottom of this petal. Very dark. So when I talk about working from life, see this lovely, the way this becomes very pale here and it works out towards the other. I didn't invent that. That was actually the way it was in the flower. So when you ask me how I make it real, the best and most honest way I can tell you is that there are no tricks. It is just looking at it and understanding what you see and then working directly with what you have in the way of information.
Yeah, because I know how to draw the picture perfect, but when I draw it, it looks like it doesn't really look real. It looks like it's, just drawn up.
Well, I didn't hear your name again, please.
Laura.
Laura. Well, Laura, when you're talking about drawing, that's different than when you're talking about painting. Drawing is different. It is lines. It is simply lines. With painting, it's something else. It's a color and shadow and highlight. You see, so it's two schools, really. Are you talking drawing with a pencil?
Painting, drawing.
Painting. Well, as I say, the best advice that I can give you, and the best piece of information that I can give you, is that you draw what you see. Therefore, try to find a subject matter that is not going to fade and deteriorate very fast.
Okay.
Such as onions and apples and potatoes and bananas and things. They take a long time to change. Flowers, you have to work fast because they do fade very quickly. Within a matter of 3 or 4 hours, it's over.
Okay.
If there's anything else I can help you with, speak now.
No, that's all right.
Thank you, Laura, for calling. Okay. Very good. Yeah, working from life is the whole point of this here program. I'm absolutely unrelenting with the business of working from life, and because I find that it is far simpler. Let me start with this lovely pink job up here, keeping the colors absolutely clean and very pure, because there's something about flowers which are in fact very pure and very clean. They blend in a subtle manner, and I'm going to try and show you very clearly how you blend them. I'm putting the pale color on first. Then I'm going to add some more of the darker color, and I'm going to start blending it towards the place that becomes darker. I am sure that, and because this is oil, the blend is comparatively simple to make. In watercolor, it's different. In watercolor, there is not the business of being able to blend it this way with as much smoothness, because watercolor doesn't behave the same way as oils. So as we're getting darker and towards the center, you can see that the blend is quite subtle, but it is definitely there, which is what makes the flower what it is. The blending of colors. Now, one of the reasons that I picked this pink one to work on in such a large context was because of the translucency of the petals. The thing to remember very carefully with flower painting, which I find many times people are not conscious enough of, is that there is a fragile quality to a flower which must be observed. If you don't observe it, you wind up with a cement flower or a flower made of an entirely different substance than what you started off with. Now, down here, the flower has, if we get really close on this, I think it would be very informative to the people to see how I'm going to be able to get this, these points of light that come from the bottom of this flower. I'm working with pure color now, and I'm going right up into the pink because it does sort of sunburst up in there, and these simple strokes will not only blend the color up from white to pink to darker pink, but it'll also give you those lovely veins. Now if I pull this up here, you're going to get a vein in the middle. Very subtle because there's not really very much to it, but it's there, and it's what separates the petal and gives you the vein that I was talking about before when I was drawing it. Now I can darken that little vein somewhat in the middle because that's the way it is on the flower, and you'll see that it becomes obvious that this is the center of the petal. Okay, there's one. Now the whole business of painting is that you go on to the next and observe that this petal is darker. Now you see, the camera is a problem when you're doing this kind of a program to be able to show you exactly what I'm seeing because it's at a different angle than the camera. You'll just have to trust me that this is how I'm seeing it. If you set up your own flowers, you will be able to observe exactly what I'm observing. Not exactly, but you will be able to have the power to observe as closely as I do the changes in colors of these petals. Now it's very convenient that this is pale and that this is dark, but this becomes light. And so now I'm going to blend this again by putting the light color on and pulling it down into the dark, quite deliberately. You can see that it is just one step at a time. For flowers that are constructed this way. There are other flowers that don't require this kind of picking apart. But when you have something as definite as a 6-petaled flower that is doing a particular thing at the moment that you're looking at it, then you must take it step by step. With lilac, or with multiple blooms, such as cherry blossoms or prune blossoms or well, lilac comes to be more than anything because it's just come out. Then you deal with it in masses. The flowers are in clusters, and then you must deal with it in masses. Now, I have a shadow coming down here from the light, and I must show that shadow because the petal is transparent. There, I need a little bit of light here. You'll see that as soon as this is in, the petal, the transparency of the petal will be obvious. But remember, subtle color and a clean brush. All right, well, this is progressing just exactly the way it ought to. Now, oh, there's that lovely, see, I'm working on this one right here. You may be seeing it in somewhat the same position I'm seeing it. Yes, very much the same. This one is facing you, and this is the one that's facing me. So it's actually, but you can see the way the color is subtle and changes from dark to light, and the light is caught on the tops of the petals and so on. So that's what I'm trying to tell you about being careful of, to observe the color changes in these very delicate constructions. I call these flowers constructions, which is, you know, that's what they are. So now I've got the convenience of finding that this pale petal right here has got a darkness behind it because of the other petal, which is going, again, the light is behind it. Hence, you're going to find yourself working with back and forth color schemes. Good. Let's have a call. Good. Let's talk to somebody. Good evening, and can I help you in any way?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you have to use certain paints for the canvas?
Yes, you have to use oil paints.
Huh?
Oil paints, yes.
Oil paints?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I want to know what kind of brush you have to use. You have to use a skinny one or a fat one?
Well, this is kind of a cross between fat and skinny. It's a cut square on the end, and it's made of red sable. And it happens to be a number. I'll probably do the whole painting with this. This is a number 10. Red sable, square cut brush.
Can you blend the paints together?
Can I blend them together?
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing right now. Have you been watching, or did you just tune in?
I just tuned in.
Well, stay tuned for a while and watch how I blend the colors, okay?
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's all.
Thanks for calling.
What kind of, I just want to know what kind of paintings you do.
Oh, I do all kinds. If you just tuned in, you missed my showing my travel paintings. I do landscapes, and then I have a very large painting of flowers that you can see later, because when the show closes, they'll probably take a picture of these large flowers that I showed before, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you do, can you paint me a picture? And show it on the air or something like that?
Well, what kind of a picture, honey?
Roses. A bouquet of roses.
Warriors?
Roses.
Roses. Oh, I love roses. Yes, why don't we wait until June when the roses come out, and I'll bring some roses up and I'll paint them.
Okay.
Because I'll paint only when they come out in bloom.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Good for him. He asked for roses. How did he know that I absolutely love to paint roses? Anyway, we'll do that, of course, come June. Now, let's get back to the not problems, but to the wonderful adventure that painting of flowers gives you, because it is a discipline. There's no question about that. You have to be disciplined, and you also have to have an insane desire to want to be able to duplicate one of the most remarkable forms in nature, namely a flower of any kind. Any flower is a remarkable structure. And to be able to learn how to draw them is essential first, and then, now if that young man is watching, he'll see how I'm blending these colors, practically blending them right on the canvas. And you'll see that when you have light and dark, an interesting and, well, almost magical, but I'd like to avoid using that word magic, because there is no such thing as magic to painting. It is an illusion, which could be termed as magical when you look at it, but it is no magic. There are no tricks here. And anyone who wants to believe that there is magic to painting is being deluded. It is not so. This is all a craft. Just as many other crafts are crafts, this is another discipline and a craft. So we are dealing here with the back petal, which has a little bit of darkness to it because something is happening to its light. So I'm going to darken some of this back petal and give it a little bit of a muddy tone. because it looks to me as though there's a shadow coming from somewhere else. However, when you see something like that, you don't question it. You just go right ahead and put the muddy tone in. However, when you finish with the muddy tone, be sure that you clean and wipe your brush very carefully to keep the colors pure. Flowers are so pure in color that must be maintained at all times as an essential part of the portrait. Because what you're doing really when you paint flowers is you're painting a portrait of the flower. Expecting it to be able to be instantly recognizable when somebody looks at this painting. So here now I'm going to blend a darker pink with that pale that I put on to give you the way the petal turns. Maybe just a trifle closer would help for this to be even more obvious than what, yeah, that's great, more obvious than what I'm talking about. Because even though the flower is big, it still has to, still have to be able to see how the blend takes place. Well, this part down here also has a sunburst of light down at the bottom, which I'll deal with in a minute. I want to get this part of the flower in up there. I'm going to use some alizarin crimson as the darker part of this petal, which is folded toward me. And there is probably all you would need to do for a quick demonstration of the painting of this flower, except over here. I'm working on a darker canvas. That should be obvious to anybody who's been watching for a few minutes, because I wanted to paint these pale pictures, pale flowers, and have them very clearly visible. Now the bottom part of this is somewhat of a pale kind of green tone. I hope it's not too subtle, but it's the sort of greenish at the base of this flower. And this white over here is not as pale as the one in the center. It's a little tiny bit darker because it's on the shadow side. But it does blend up into the rest of the flower just the way the center one does. Now, there presumably is about all you would need to give you an idea of the portrait of this flower. Let me pull a little bit of this vein down here, a little bit more. Now, let's get to the next one. I'm going to be working on this yellowish one, which has veins of red running through it. And so we can come over to this part of the canvas, and I'm going to put the pale color on first. This is very bright. This particular piece of the petal is very bright and overlaps the other one there. So I'm going to put the bright one on. It's almost white, but not really. And I'm using some pure white and some Naples yellow and a touch of cadmium yellow. There's also a white area here, or a light area rather. There is no white in this flower. It's a light area, even though it may appear to be very pale on the TV monitor, on the television screen, because it's really brilliantly lit here. But this is a sort of a creamy yellow. Let's see, and then down here, nicely enough, is a very bright yellow, because flower, when somebody says, what is the color of the flower, it is clear, I think from this demonstration, that there is no one color to a flower. There are many colors involved in the painting of a flower. Now, we are going to run around here and go on the inside of this flower, which is quite dark, because it is interior. Let me see if that, there, isn't that remarkable? Look at that beautiful thing. And that yellow flower shot with red lines, very dramatic. The designer of that certainly had a fine sense of proportion and design, no question about it. Now, I'm doing the inside of this flower. Even though it appears to be very dark, I've got to be sure that I don't get it so dark that it loses the flowery look. It's sometimes you say that's pretty dark in there, and then you put it in too dark, and the next thing you know, you've wound up with something that is not flower-like. It's not subtle and it's not delicate enough. So here's some inside part of the of this cup, and as soon as I put the beautiful red shocks in it, red stripes in it, you'll see that the flower begins to make some sense. Here is the light part, the interior light part of that petal, Almost not there, but it does separate this one from that one. Okay, so this one that had the very light part becomes a little bit darker as it turns and goes in. The way you put a darker tone on anything yellow is you observe what the flower's got, but the usual toning down of yellow, or in other words, the making of dark yellow, is either mauve or green. There's a call. Okay, we'll abandon the yellow flower for just a moment. Yes, good evening. Can I help you?
Hello, Mr. Windrow. It's Chris.
Well, finally. Hi, Chris.
How you doing?
Fine.
I'm preparing a painting here for an art show,
Good.
and it's an oil painting, and it has to be done by the end of the week. And I'm going to have a little bit of a problem with it drying by the time I have it go in the show. And I am using a bottle of cobalt dryer.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what I like to ask you is, I don't even, can that be used as a thinner with the paints?
Yes, you're going to. Yes, it can. You will lose texture.
I'll lose the texture of the painting?
You'll lose texture. In other words, the paint becomes so thin that it almost... You know what you ought to do? You ought to... I know that it's hard. Are you driving a car yet?
Yeah.
Would it be impossible for you to come over to Setauket?
No, it wouldn't be impossible.
Well, see, I could give you a spoonful of my medium, which means that it would dry in plenty of time, and it would facilitate your painting.
I see.
However, if you can't do that,
Yeah.
and our lives are not so that we can just jump in the car and come jazzing up to the North Shore. So I think the copal, did you say copal, not cobalt, copal dryer, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Okay. The copal dryer will work to a degree. What are you painting, Chris?
You mean what's the picture itself?
Yes.
It's really not any particular picture. It's kind of like shapes.
Ah, okay. Are you working in flat areas?
Yeah.
Well, then I don't think you have to really worry too much about blending, do you?
Well, yeah, the background and one side of the picture.
Yeah.
It's kind of a modernistic type thing. It's
Okay.
got a lot of different shapes
All right.
and stuff.
The only advice that I have about the copal dryer is use it sparingly.
Okay.
And if the painting isn't dry, put it in a frame that's deep enough so that people aren't going to go whacking up against it.
Okay.
Is it in school?
The show?
Yeah.
Well, it's not being held in a school. It's being, it's at some sort of center. It's an art show. It's
Okay.
collaborative, all pictures from
All
the
right.
schools.
Well, in the case of dire emergency, if the painting is simply really not dry enough to hang safely, take a nice magic marker and make a very pretty lettered sign saying, caution, wet paint.
Okay.
Or painting is still wet.
Sure.
It will give a sort of glamorous thing that here is the painter has worked up till the last minute in order to produce this masterwork.
Okay. I also have one more question for you.
Good.
I have a bunch of brushes here, and they're pretty old. And there's dried paint deep down inside of the brush.
Yeah.
All right. Now it's really hard. The brushes are like really hard.
Yeah.
And what's the best thing to use to like soften up the bristles and get that paint out of there?
I use lacquer thinner.
Lacquer thinner.
Lacquer thinner. Are these brushes bristle or are they nylon?
Hold. Let me see if these. Well, there's two of them here that are nylon. The other two are bristle.
Okay. If when you use, you can use either lacquer thinner or acetone.
Okay.
Don't let them sit in there overnight.
Mm-hmm.
But stick them in a half an hour. Check them. See if they're starting to give a little bit.
Okay.
And if the paint is really crusted down inside of the ferrule, this is the ferrule, this silvery part is the ferrule.
Exactly, that's where it is.
Okay, you may have to take a needle when the brush gets soft enough and go whacking in there with a needle to try and separate those really impacted pigments.
Okay.
And you may be able to save them. And there is a scolding now following this wonderful piece of advice. Don't ever let your brushes get hard again, Christopher.
Well, some of these aren't exactly my brushes. Some of them are from the classroom, and I'm just like trying to do her a favor and soften some of them up.
Her.
Yes.
Well, I hope she's grateful. In any case, keeping brushes clean is not the easiest job in the world. You have to think about it, and you have to have it on your mind all the time. And anyway, but I do believe that you will probably find some decent results. And after you've finished with the lacquer thinner and the acetone, take the brush and a cake of soap, ivory soap, and wet the soap and run around on the soap with the brush and make up a little lather and then rinse it properly, and then your brushes should be clean.
Okay.
All right.
All right. And if at all possible, I'd like to get together soon, just kind of show you what I've been up to.
I'd love to see it, Chris. I mean,
Sure.
we didn't start this romance for nothing.
Okay.
I'm sure glad you called. You're driving a car and you're all grown up and everything now, and, well, I forgive you for that.
Okay. I'll give you a
Call me
call
and
during
try
the
and get
week.
together.
Sure.
Fine, Chris.
Okay.
Fine.
Have a nice night.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ah, voice of the past. Well, fortunately, all these young people have a habit of changing, and we don't. So there's the best part of that story. In any case, let's get back to the painting of this remarkable flower. It has ins and outs, and it has many tones, and it has some glamorous parts to it. It has little dull parts, and it also has very humorous parts to it. Namely, these lovely red crazy little streaks that go running through it, which is doubtlessly because it's a hybrid of some sort, and somebody really worked at getting them this way. I didn't see any of these, this type of tulip in Europe, so maybe it's our American horticulturists that have come up with this harlequin type of pattern on the flower. So I'm working all with the yellows and trying to make some sense out of this very, well, it is complex, but I'm using my areas of light and dark to my own advantage, putting in the light places first because, you know, flowers tend to fade quickly. And when you're under these hot lights, they get unhappy. So I really try to work as quickly as possible under these lights. Which is a piece of advice that should be remembered for people who are going to be working outside in the sun with a flower is okay if they are still unpicked. The minute you pick them, they kind of resent it, and they get themselves really uptight and start to fade. So here we have now beginning a darker area coming in here with some vermilion, a touch of the rose red, and the petal begins to change color because there are so many red stripes. In order to keep you fascinated with this, let me put some red stripes in right now. I'm going to take my small brush. See this nice small brush? Here's the size of my brush compared to that flower. You'll be able to see the dimensions of that brush and the length of those bristles. And I'm going to use a pure vermilion for these stripes. See those nifty stripes, aren't they great? Well, here we go. Let's get some of those stripes in, and the form of this flower is going to begin to, the characteristic of this flower is going to begin to manifest itself with the introduction of these red stripes. They are audaciously red in places, and they're in that I can't figure whether or not they have any set pattern as far as stripes are concerned, because every once in a while I'll find more on one side of the petal than on the other. So I think it may be just an arbitrary type of design in these stripes, but they are certainly challenging to put in because you have to put them in subtly, but also fairly competently. Let me see. And now this one gets a stripe running down. Ooh, how does that go? Oh yes, here we are. It goes in this direction. And you can't just put the stripes in any direction because that determines the position of the petal. They go in a certain pattern. In other words, this one is going towards the center of this petal. Let's see what happens over here. Now this stripe is darker because it's over in the shadow. Let me see, a little bit more. And it curves down. The vein is dark in this one. Let's see if we'll play with this a little bit more later, and as I'm doing this. But as you can see, it is one step at a time. There is a shadow that is being cast here on this flower, and it's quite gray. It's coming from the other petal. This is important when you're trying to get light on a flower, to give those shadows their just due, because they are what, the shadows are what make the flower appear to be third-dimensional. The young man asked me, how do you get the flower to look so real? And it's got not only got to do with the observation of the construction of the flower, but it's also got to do with the shadows that are cast inside the flower. Here we go. Okay, we have another call. Good evening, and who are you?
Dominic.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
My name is Dominic.
Donald?
Dominic.
Dominic. Hi, Dominic.
Hi. I wondered if you would draw me something.
What would you like me to draw you, Dominic?
A bird.
A what?
A bird.
A bird.
Yeah.
I'll be glad to do that sometime on another program. Right now I'm very involved with these flowers, Dominic. What kind of a bird?
Cardinal.
A cardinal. Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Go on.
Let me see, my sister would like to talk to you. She wants to ask you something too.
What's her name, Dominic?
Tanya.
Sonia?
Tanya.
Tanya. Okay, put Tanya on, Dominic.
Tanya, go ahead. Okay, hello.
Oh, hi, Tanya.
Hello.
How old are you?
I'm 8.
Oh, good. How are you? What would you like to talk to me about?
What?
Tanya, what would you like to talk to
Can
me
you
about?
draw me a flower?
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm doing, Tanya. What kind? What kind of a flower?
A rose.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's the second request I've had for a rose. So, Tanya, you keep watching this program, and someday I'll come in with a rose in the month of June. All right?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye. Well, Dominic and Tanya had some good ideas. Let's get back to this. I'm sure that Tanya didn't want me to interrupt what I was doing to do her rose right now, although you never can tell. So here we have this lovely harlequin tulip that has a shadow right here, and then that shadow is also cast on the other side of the petal, and it continues, but it's changed color because that petal has got more red in it. So as you can see, you have to watch it and be concerned with what you're seeing. Let's see, let's get this nice fine brush and get some very crazy and beautiful red stripes in this part of the flower. As you can see, I changed brushes because of the need to get some details. And there's little spots here. So as you can see, when you get those on, the characteristic of the flower begins to emerge. This petal has now become sort of half red, with a little bit of, let's see, some lovely reflected light over here on the outside. But the reason that it's dark down here is because it's in shadow, just like my head is in shadow when it gets between the light and the canvas. Now, and here we have some another red stripe coming out from here. And a few stripes here. So, as I said earlier, one does this one step at a time. You turn off the phone, you tell the children to play, you decide that not to eat until 4 or 5 hours later when you start painting these flowers, and you give it all the attention you possibly can afford at the time, because flowers change. When I do it, I don't speak to anybody until I've gotten most of the flower done. To refine the flower later is possible, and I have done that for a long time. You do the main and most essential parts, and then you can later on refine it. But for the most time, you must remember that this is a fleeting subject, not like an imperishable thing such as a vase or a chair, and it also is not going to be ever the same again. In other words, you might be able to find a tulip in your patch of tulips the next morning, but the chances are that it will not be exactly the same as the one you started with. So here we have these stripes going in this direction, which is very important to follow. as I said earlier, because it gives you the direction and the manner of growth of this particular petal. So the blend between here and there, because this is oil, is being done rather simply. You simply take the darker red and then the paler color that's on there and make them fuse. Blending and fusing are somewhat the same. Now underneath here, a little bit of Naples yellow is going to give me the reflected light that comes at the bottom of this flower. Tends to be somewhat orange and quite brilliant at the same time. Well, with the exception of this little place, which I find is quite dark and which I'll accommodate. I'll make that very dark because it is going onto the inside of the flower and there's a slight shadow being cast by this petal. All right, and we also have the rest of this coming here and a very pale area here to show you that that's part. This is the petal as it's turning around the corner. Now, if children find that this is tedious and much too time-consuming, that's fine. Children are not expected to be able to sit down for a long period of time and have a concentration of the length span of adults. We adults become a little bit more sedentary and we're able to concentrate a little bit longer than children. However, flower painting for children should be encouraged at every possible opportunity, not only at home if there is painting going on at home, but also in the schools. I find that flower painting is an ignored art, and I'm not talking about doing 5 yellow dots with a black spot in the middle and call that a daisy. I'm talking about really the observing of the flower. So if there are children watching, flower painting, I feel, is a vital part of learning how to paint. Okay, even the stem has got a characteristic that has to be paid attention to. It's dark underneath here and it casts a little shadow from the flower. That'll tell you that the stem is a circle. It's a cylinder, a long cylinder, I grant you, but it is nevertheless a cylinder. And that shadow that turns tells you the story of the cylinder. Well, we have got the beginning of a flower painting. We're coming very quickly towards the end of the program, but I'm going to continue anyway, hoping that this is of enough interest for you to attempt to do some flower painting. Now, red is a very crazy color to work with. There are many reds, and they also are the variety of reds is more than the variety of yellows. Now that may sound like an absolutely categorical statement, but it's true. Because reds tend to turn into oranges as well as pinks and mauves. The subtle change between this red and that one is extremely subtle. I have to cover up. Sorry. Maybe I'll just stop talking a bit and just paint because I seem to have a rather bad frog in my throat. The dark reds are bases of purple as well as blues, alizarin crimsons, and all kinds of other very fleeting and difficult tones to get. So if you decide to paint red, experiment with it first. It is probably the last color that you should be working with. Pinks and yellows are much more cooperative and a lot less difficult to decipher. Deciphering the different tones of red is what the problem is. So as you can see, it is the reflections are really difficult with this wet paint. Nevertheless, all on the interior of this flower is a dark area because it is the inside of the cup. So I'm going to put it in rather quickly to be able to show you. Here this wonderful shadow comes down here. And the inside of this flower is quite dark, and I'm going to use some pure alizarin crimson here for the interior. Now, let me point out that as long as I'm speaking very quietly, because I don't want to start that coughing fit again, this program is usually rebroadcast on Saturdays at 4 o'clock. This past Saturday, it was rebroadcast earlier. It went on at 3:30. So, consult your preview magazine, and if you see that I'm on earlier, tune in, because if you've missed anything this evening, you'll be able to catch up on Saturday, which I think is very convenient. Now, yes, I have a call. Let's have a call. Good. Yes, good evening.
This is Heath McClure.
Yes?
Okay. I'm interested in cartooning, and I take art classes, and she says that I shouldn't do cartooning because she wants me to grow out of that. So do you think I should stay in it or go out and just do sketching?
Well, what is your name, young man?
Heath.
Keith. Keith, I see absolutely no reason in the world why you wouldn't cartoon and cartoon until your heart's content. Cartooning is an art form which has survived now for almost 5,000 years. Now, if it's good enough for 5,000 years, it should certainly be good enough for us.
Yeah.
If you are interested in cartooning, go for it.
Okay.
It is a serious art form. If anybody tries to tell you that it is not, I suggest that maybe Disney, you ought to, let's investigate that. Let's see whether or not the Disney form is an art form.
Yeah.
Also, cartooning is extremely difficult. You may have noticed that, Keith.
Yeah.
And, Keith, do it. Just go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's good. Be a cartoonist, Keith. The only advice I have is be the best.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you called and that you asked my advice, because if that's your calling, boy, you're lucky to have a calling. A lot of people don't have a calling, and if you love cartooning, then you just marry it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's great. Bye-bye, Keith.
That bike.
What? Okay. Well, I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to. I'm just glad that he was able to call me and to ask me that question, and that I was able to be my usual shy self and give my very valued opinion. In any case, I have recommended people to the Disney California Institute of the Arts for years, where they train animators and cartoonists, and man, if you can cartoon, you're a genius. So let's not put down the cartoonists. Let's encourage them and send them out into the world to produce some of the great stuff. All right, we have a red flower here that has already gotten, oh lordy, so many different reds, and I'm going to hold this a little bit forward so that we can try to get rid of some of these intense reflections which are distracting and are counterproductive to my being able to show you how to do this, except that now my arm's in the way. Okay, the bottom of this petal is quite dark, and the reason that it is so hard to work with the red is because red seems to blend into itself I keep using the word subtle. So sneaky. It's such a sneaky way of blending into itself that it kind of runs away with you, and it's hard. So what you have to do is to look for the parts of the petal that are pale on the top. And then all of a sudden that works into your hand and gives you the opportunity to separate this petal from the next one. Such as here, we've got a nice pale red here that is telling you about that. Also, when the reds become orange, that helps a great deal, such as here, against this dark background. Well, you know what? We're coming to the end of this program, which is okay, seeing as how we've accomplished enough in this very short hour to show you, first of all, a finished painting of flowers, some real flowers to work from, and a study of the real flowers. Okay, why don't we just put this down here? You can see the difference in size and the difference in proportion. Here is the beginning of some flowers. Here is a fairly finished composition, big ones. And here are the little guys from which they were done. This all presupposes that you're interested in doing flower paintings. As a painter, I don't see how you could resist being seduced by the colors of these spring flowers. Our season is long. We're going to have at least until September for wonderful flowers to come out, and that gives you an opportunity to try it. Don't try it on expensive stuff. Try it on cheap board, canvas board, which you can pick up at Pearl Paint in East Meadow for 50 cents a piece. You don't have to spend any more than that if you're practicing. But by all means, practice and work from life. In the meantime, keep your brushes clean. That's the trick. Also, observe and see what you see and try to translate it to the flat surface of a canvas. I'll be back here next Tuesday evening to probe into some more challenges of the business of painting and drawing. So, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.